Well, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for everyone going on mute. Thank you. We're recording the session so that we can put this on our All-In Hub and you can share with colleagues and the people that we did have about 50, 60 people signing up for today. So we'll obviously be sharing the recording with them afterwards. This is the third in our how-to sessions for the All-In Action Plan. And it follows on from the All-In Summit that we had in June, where we had a fantastic panel discussion around BRiM and the first action that this is about today. And that was very much about what is BRiM, why is it important? And this is sort of a sequential episode to hear from some of the businesses that have actually used the BRiM framework and in very sort of different parts of their organisations, just sort of echoing what the framework does. It looks at every aspect of advertising and marketing and how we can improve Black representation and experience. So I'm delighted we've got fantastic speakers today. Joining us, we've got Toby Horry, who is Director of Brand Marketing and Content at TUI. We've got Reg Moa, who is Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Omnicom Media Group. I'm not going to make the joke. And Sophia Haynes, who's Director of Campaigns at the IAB. So I'm delighted we're going to be hearing from them about how they've employed the BRiM framework in their businesses. But first of all, it'll be really helpful to hear from Dan, as ever in these sessions, just to give us a reminder of why we chose this for the first action, what the data from the All-In Census showed us for Black talent in the industry. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, morning, everyone. As Sharon said, I'm just going to run you through some of the key findings in relation to Black representation and Black experience in the industry. From the All-In survey. I'm just got some slides and share my screen. Hopefully, can people see that okay? Excellent. So just as a reminder, the census, the survey received an incredible response. 16,000 responses across the industry. Which is the largest response ever recorded for our industry to a survey. And I'm pretty sure it's the largest response to any industry D&I survey in the UK. I've kind of looked for larger ones, I've not found it. So it really was an impressive reaction from the industry and just showed kind of the buy-in, which we worked at equated to around about £5.5 million in terms of industry time and the time people spent filling it in. So something to be proud of there in terms of engagement. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about representation and overall Black representation in advertising. It kind of aligns with the UK average, so it was slightly higher if anything, so it's 3.4% in All-In compared to 2.9%, and that's the UK working population. The benchmark from the Office of National Statistics there. So on the surface, at face value, it looks like representation's, okay, it's in line with the UK averages. However, this masks kind of a number of issues, two main issues in terms of representation. The first one being representation at senior management is very low. So you see on this slide here, the C-suite representation falls down to 1% essentially, and even just at senior manager level, it's 2%. So below both the All-In industry average and the UK working population. So suggesting that there's obviously problems progressing to senior management positions for Black people in the industry. The second key issue around representation is the representation is not reflective of London, where obviously the bulk of the industry is based. So in terms of response to the survey, around 80% of respondents were in London, and work that we've done based on LinkedIn profiles suggests that anything from 60 to 70% of the people employed in advertising are based in London. So when you take that into account, you can see that Black representation is significantly under what you'd see in the wider London working population and the London general population, where working population is 9% Black in London, compared to just 4% from the advertising industry. So kind of, although black representation looks good on the surface, when you look at those two kind of key issues, you can see there's still a lot of work to be done with representation. I'm going to talk a little bit about experience now, and obviously representation one element of the issues, which does tend to get quite a lot of focus and resource from companies, but as you'll come to see on these slides, the experience is quite difficult. Oh, sorry, I've missed a slide here. Just jumping back onto the one on your screen at the moment, looking at representation and where it's highest, and you can see there that there's a high proportion of working class amongst the black people in the ad industry, 31% from a working class background compared to 19% from a white background. And if we look at age, this is an interesting one. So in that youngest age group of 18 to 24s, 7% black representation, which obviously is significantly higher than any of the other age groups and the industry average. So, you know, does this represent changes in recruitment practices that we're beginning to see at companies, or does it represent, you know, just the kind of the fallout from black people in the industry as you move through the age ranges? There's no way to know for sure either way, but I do think that it probably is starting to reflect some of the changes in recruitment practices and the initiatives being launched. But as we'll see from the experiences that I'm about to talk about, it probably does reflect that black people drop out of the industry as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about career progression. We had a couple of measures on this, and just in terms of the experiential measures in the survey, on pretty much everyone, the black experience was more negative than other minority ethnic groups, and clearly the white experience as well. So a couple of measures here on progression. Race hinders career progression. 22%, you know, sort of 1 in 5 black people agreed with that statement, compared to 14% for any ethnic minority, and have faced obstacles in their career due to who they are. Again, you know, 3 in 10 black people thought that was true, compared to 24% across any other ethnic minorities. And I think these two indicators here, they kind of all feed into that 1% at C-suite level, and the issues that there are in career progression. I'm going to look now a little bit at culture, company culture. So looking at the proportion that feel that they belong at their company. So for black people, that is significantly lower than the other groups. Again, I think this is a really telling stat, as we talk a lot about role models and visibility. So we asked whether you see people like yourselves in senior management positions in the industry or at your company, in fact, was the question. And, you know, almost 3/4 of the black respondents said that they do not see people like themselves in senior positions. And when you compare that to the white response there from white people of 18%, you know, it's absolutely huge discrepancy there in terms of role models and visibility in senior positions. And then the third one, they feel supported at work. Again, you know, the black respondents to the survey much less likely to feel supported at work than both other ethnic minorities and white people in the industry. Now, that was company culture, so that was a lot of kind of perception. Now we're looking at actual demeaning behavior and sort of negative experience, so what people have actually experienced. So in terms of whether someone has been bullied or undermined in the last 12 months at their current company, much more, you know, 19% of black people in the industry said that they had been bullied or undermined in the last 12 months, which was, you know, higher than the figure for any ethnic minority and for white people. Again, verbal harassments or insults, again, highest for Black respondents there, 12% versus 10% and 6%. And probably most telling of all, whether you've actually personally experienced racial discrimination in the last 12 months at work. And that was, 22% of Black people in the industry. Unsurprisingly, much higher than the white proportion, and even higher than any ethnic minority group as well. So, that's almost 1 in 5 of our Black colleagues in the industry have faced some kind of racial discrimination. And all of this kind of culminates basically to mean that almost a third of all Black people working in the industry said that they were likely to leave the industry based on a lack of inclusion and or discrimination that they had experienced. Yeah, I mean, it's just that it's there in the stats, really. It's quite shocking, some of those points there, and obviously just gives more weight to the need and the requirement that BRiM exists, and companies begin and individuals begin to take action.
Thanks, Dan. That's great. Yeah, some really sobering stats. I think that's probably one of the most shocking ones in the whole census, and that obviously evidences why how it's shaped the All in Action plan and the first action itself. Jumping very quickly to Bina. Bina's just going to set up, just for those as a reminder of what BRiM is. It stands for Black Representation in Marketing. It sits on the AA website, but it's actually an initiative, long-term initiative that's been driven by Facebook's or Meta's Client Council. So it's got some really big global businesses behind it. And Bina's just going to show us very quickly now how it's made up and how you can use it.
Morning, everyone. Just a couple of quick slides, as Sharon said. So to cover off BRiM, essentially what it is, it's a collection of tools and resources that are available for everybody to use, whatever your level, whatever kind of marketing or advertising company you are in. There should be something there that can be used by you. It's split into 4 parts. Sorry, one second. First part is where your work lives. So basically the placement of your media. Second part in your marketing, the content that you're producing. The third part is who you work with, your partners and your suppliers. And finally, the fourth part in your organization. So your team composition and tools there around things like recruitment. As Sharon said, it's available on the Ad Association website /BRiM. And just a couple of hints and tips, ways to use BRiM. It's a framework and a collection of tools, as we've said, but there's different ways to think about it. You could use the framework structure to measure against any existing initiatives that are already going on within your organization. It's also useful for identifying gaps. So those 4 sections that I referenced a minute ago, there may be a particular section that needs work or needs highlighting. There's also the option just to browse through the framework tools. You can just have a quick look through in your lunchtime or when you get a few minutes, and that will give you some practical advice and templates that you can just browse and have a look through. You could use it to help set goals. There's some resources there around that. There's a number of case studies on the website. We're going to go through a few today, but more will be added all the time, and they may help just give you ideas of things you can be doing internally as well. And finally, if you join the community, you'll receive the newsletter and regular updates, which again may just help to inspire and help us start in this area. So that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Bina. I think it's helpful just to remind everybody and to see it in a couple of slides like that. So I'm delighted to have these fantastic speakers with us today. Toby, I'm going to come to you first. It'd be great to hear from an advertiser's point of view, how you were inspired at TUI by the framework and how it's influenced your latest campaign.
Sure. So hi everyone. My name's Toby and I'm the Group Brand and Content Director at TUI. So we take people on holiday, or at least we try to when the regulations allow. we've been quite fortunate. I've been quite fortunate in the last 18 months in that we've had an opportunity to actually take elements of BRiM and put them into action. So I think, like a lot of people, I've been in my role for 3 years, and I'm very conscious of the need to improve diversity, including and equality, across a number of different dimensions at TUI. But I think a lot of the thing was, well, where do I start? And I guess the most obvious thing, and the thing that BRiM really prompted for me, was start with what I can control. And as I say, we've been reasonably lucky in the last year that we've been making quite a lot of content and advertising. So what I'm just going to do is just quickly share. Hopefully you can see. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, you can see that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. So we've actually just done a lot of work on our brand and our brand strategy and our brand identity, and we've shot a lot of new advertising. And so what BRiM really prompted us to do was really think very, very hard about how the diversity that we are showing in this advertising, really important, because this is advertising that's being rolled out across all of Europe, across all markets. So we've thought very hard about it. And actually this on the screen here is the hero image that we have used across different markets. So showing an older black woman as our hero person. But it's also made us think, and whilst clearly BRiM is about black representation, it's made us think really hard about all the different dimensions of diversity. So this is just a selection of things that we've shot in the last 6 months. So top left, you've got there's actually a shoot for our cruise product, and we had a female amputee as one of our cast there. A couple of shots from our brand advertising. We're actually currently doing an internal colleague shoot. So for when we need assets for recruitment or internal comms, etc. And we realised that a lot of our internal assets were, I mean, quite frankly, a lot of them were really cheesy, but also they weren't very representative. So we're actually running quite a number of shoots at the moment across different markets to try and make sure we've got good representation of the different colleagues we've got across markets. The bottom right is another shot from our most recent ad, and I've put the ad in the chat. Actually, clearly I'm not going to expect you to watch it now, but if you want to watch it, then do have a look. And then the bottom image, we do weddings across different markets, and we realised that our same-sex wedding photography wasn't up to scratch. We didn't have enough assets, so we worked on that as well. So I think what BRiM has done for us, and for me in particular, is really sort of broken down the components of what you can do. We haven't tried to do everything at once, but we're very conscious we need to do more. So we started very much with your second point being that you talked about the content that you produce. We're now looking very hard at the media element in terms of where we place our media to see where we're under or over indexing. And I'm simultaneously working with HR and procurement on the third and fourth elements of who we work with internally and who we work with externally. So that is work in train, but I also wanted to share where I feel we've made the most progress. And then the last thing I was just going to say was what it's also prompted us to do is develop our own guidelines, because as you can imagine, we have a lot of content. Every single hotel that we sell, every product, it amounts to thousands and thousands of pieces of photography and video, and we didn't have a set of guidelines for people producing that content, because that content can be produced across different markets by different teams. So we've developed this set of guidelines for anyone that is producing content to refer back to, and it's very much inspired by BRiM in terms of the proposals and the pillars that are in there. But this is something that we're rolling out internally as well. So that's just a very, very brief summary of the work we've been doing. Clearly happy to take any questions afterwards, but I hope that was useful.
That's really helpful, Toby, and I'm sure there will be questions. So I shall we'll open that up to everybody to share in the chat as we carry on through the session.
I just need to find the stop sharing button. Hang on.
Oh yeah, we're doing multiple sharing in this quite ambitious sharing program in this session.
I don't know where it's gone. Oh, there it is. Stop sharing. Okay, right, got it.
Thanks, Toby. Reg, coming on to you and the work at OMG, it would be great to hear how you were, whether you were inspired by BRiM or whether BRiM's kind of just shaping now what you're doing. I'd love to hear about the sponsorship program that you've launched at OMG.
Yeah, so to be honest, can everyone hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Brilliant, yeah. So to be honest, we were kind of on that journey. So when I started a year ago, we already had sort of targets in place. We had our advisory teams. So sponsorship was something that the multicultural advisory team were very keen on, and also the agencies within the group. So people were kind of looking for something. Now, the targets we have are not just for representation as a whole, it's at different levels. And as you've seen from the figures, it's easier to get people in the entry level than it is to progress people through if you're sort of Black or from minority background. And that was frustrating, to be honest, for everyone. You know, people wanted to see that change. We've all made commitments sort of post George Floyd. And so I kind of thought, well, actually, the people at the top, our senior leaders, they're the ones who do actually have the power to make these changes happen. And I guess it was just helping them realize that. And so we set up this sponsorship program, and what it actually does is it empowers senior leaders. So if you become a sponsor, then you've got the influence, you've got the network, you can actually move the levers in order to help this career progression happen. And then we also sort of identify sort of mid-level talent from minority backgrounds to help to sort of match them up with senior leaders to help make that progression happen. And you develop that relationship, and we're running this pilot over 12 months to kind of see that progression. And sort of where it fits in is within the sort of team composition element of BRiM. So we'd kind of already started on that journey, and then when BRiM came out, we kind of started working with the different BRiM groups. So I've been on different groups, sort of giving them sort of updates on what we're doing. We've provided a case study just to kind of share that learning really, and sort of draw in what we can. So in terms of getting it started, it is, we got in a partner business in the community to help us. They've run some of these programs before, so it was helpful to have their experience involved. And they've also done a survey which would allow us to evaluate the program at the end of the pilot. So I sort of act as the project lead and sort of coordinate that activity. But I think really key is the individual agency teams. So they help with the matching, they know the individuals involved. And what we've done is actually match senior leaders within each agency to people within that agency, because they're working on the same sort of area. And so it's easier for them to kind of provide those stretch opportunities. And so what I mean by that is sort of opportunities that allow an individual to raise their profile, or get us a common opportunity, present to the board, anything that's going to help them with that kind of career development. And they'll understand the person they're sponsoring, the sponsee, they'll understand their kind of career trajectory a bit better. Or even if they're not directly in the same sort of lane, they'll be able to bring someone else in from their network to help support. So that was really key. So one of the sort of main challenges I think you face when you're doing something like this is, we've got this belief in meritocracy. And, it's hard. If you've worked hard to get where you are, you believe that all people need to do is work hard and they'll get through. But often there's a different reality. And I think how we explained it during our sort of induction process and our launch was that sponsorship actually happens informally for everyone. If you're senior, you'll identify someone that maybe you relate to, reminds you of yourself. And, informally, you will kind of promote their interests when they're not in the room. You'll, bring them in on some accounts. You'll help them navigate that world. And where people from Black and minority backgrounds miss out is that there isn't that immediate connection, because, we don't look like the people at the top. And so it often doesn't happen. And so what our sponsorship program is about formalizing that so that it does happen. And I guess you get to that comfortable point to kind of admit that, yes, we do have racial biases. And so that's why we need this. And then, of course, there are other programs like mentors and coach, and it's just identifying the difference between what a mentor does and a coach does and what a sponsor does. So, you know, the sponsor is about really promoting your interests. Yes, there are some elements of sort of being a mentor and coaching, but it is essentially about sort of practical help that you can give, sort of moving the levers, as it were, to get someone to the point in their career where they can go for a senior job and stand a good chance of getting there, because people know who they are, they know about their work, they've got the kind of experiences that people value in order to feel, okay, this is the person that we can take on board. So you're seen as a value rather than a risk, because as we know, whatever seems different than what we've had before can often feel risky. And yeah, we're, I'd say, halfway in, and we've had some positive feedback. I've put some of those on the slide. I won't go through all of them, but generally, I think people actually welcomed the opportunity, sponsors and sponsees, to connect with someone in their agency that they might not have ordinarily formed a relationship with, and just learn things from each other. And then, you know, bringing someone into a meeting or a gathering that wouldn't normally have been there, and then being able to gain value from a different opinion, a different perspective. And you know, people can see how that actually adds value now. And then just practical help. So all of those things, I think, really demonstrate the value of the project up to this point. And some of the other things that we saw, like if you could turn the microaggressions that we talked about earlier on when we looked at the data, I think having those, it actually provides a safe space to have those conversations. And, you know, a lot of the senior leaders, that invariably most of them will be white, it'll be a different experience for them. And so having that one-to-one conversation, it gives them more proximity and a better understanding. So not only in the case of being a sponsor, but in the case of being a leader, understanding some of these sort of situations, if you like, that will then allow them to manage the team or manage the organization that they're in charge of a lot better, because they've had that, they've now got that proximity to it. So some insights from the first 6 months. I think line management engagement is key, and we were aware of that, but I think what happens is that it will take time. So if you're doing these stretch opportunities, it may take you away from the day job, if you like. And so it's really important that the line managers are on board, and so they're okay to kind of fill in or give you time to take part in these things. Also, I think what we've realized is sponsorship, actually, it's about instilling leaders with core skills, and the skills that we're delivering in the sponsorship program, actually all leaders need to have them. So that's one of the things that we need to do is roll out the learning from that. And also, like, honest conversations. So it's great to get, you know, two people together to have that kind of honest dialogue. And we need to kind of develop that more. And so sometimes it is about having those uncomfortable conversations, you know, because sometimes people are halfway out the door when they're on these programs. They're at the mid-level, so they're almost like they're like rare jewels, because as you go further up, you have less Black and brown people. So when you have retention issues, you know, at the moment, lots of people are trying to find people to fill vacancies, and that's across the board. But when you lose a Black or a brown person, it's a lot harder to replace them like for like. So it's about having those conversations early, and, you know, how can we progress people? And ultimately, it is a pyramid. So as you go higher up, there are less spots, and when people get to the top of the pyramid, they're a bit where they are in their life. It's a bit more comfortable. They're not really going anywhere soon. So if those positions don't become available, then you've got that impasse, and then what happens? So it's about looking at what the progression options are, and again, through having those honest conversations, what do those progression options look like if there isn't the ability to go into a managerial position straight away? You know, the timescales might be different as well. So senior leaders will have an idea that maybe this person will be ready in a couple of years, but they may have already been in the industry for a couple of years, and they're thinking, well, I want to move in the next 6 months. So again, you've got that sort of seeing things from a different perspective, different reality. And then what's come out from those conversations is entrepreneurship. I know you're going to have that session with BRiM, and what you'll find is a lot of people that go the entrepreneurial route have actually been in the industry, and that's where they sort of go off to. So what we want to look at is how do we sort of mitigate against losing that skill set, in terms of, even if people do go into an entrepreneurial route, they've still got that skill set. Can we still work with them? Can we get them into our pipeline? And that goes into another area of the BRiM framework. So it's kind of like looking at the possibility of linking those up. And yeah, so I'll leave that there, and it's some food for thought for people to really consider. And
that's excellent. Thanks so much, Reg. It's really clear, and it's great to illustrate it on screen. I love the fact that you sort of created a dynamic that is organic for everybody else. It's, as you said, it happens naturally for so many of us, but the knock-on effect of that is really tangible. So it's sort of developing existing leaders with new skills, educating people and opening up those really important conversations as well. So it sounds like a great initiative. Thanks for sharing. So we've heard from the advertiser and how we can change representation on screen and in print, from Reg about how we can, from the agency point of view, look at our workforce. Sophia, it'd be great to hear from you about what the IAB has been doing in terms of developing guidelines for minority-owned businesses, so other aspects of the supply chain, I suppose. Can you tell us a bit more about what the guidelines cover, and how they're helping Black talent?
Sure. So as you say, it's sort of kind of a different part of it. This is kind of diversity in the sort of media supply chain, I guess. So we're the trade body for digital advertising. Our focus is on building a sustainable future for that digital advertising. And naturally, it can't be sustainable and brilliant if we aren't supporting and encouraging diverse and inclusive media owners. And when I say that, we're talking about minority-owned media owners and sites, and also sites that reach underrepresented audiences. So that's kind of the area I'm talking around. And this came about through conversations with Nationwide and their agency Wavemaker. So some work I was doing with them, we were talking about diversity. And sometimes they were finding, whilst they were seeking and wanting to work with more diverse media owners, some of the smaller, more niche ones maybe didn't have a specialist digital team. They therefore didn't have as much time or knowledge of how to manage kind of the ad serving part of it and the sort of the implementation of it. And this is an industry that is full of acronyms and changing a lot quickly because technology pushes us that way within digital advertising. So we wanted to find a way to sort of support or help or provide some knowledge and information, which is where we created what is essentially, it's a 4-page document that just breaks down the rudimentary elements of digital advertising in terms of what are the standard ad formats, because sometimes they were finding they'd speak to a media owner and they'd offer an unusual format, which is not a big problem, but obviously if it's not common, then advertisers aren't going to, or agencies aren't going to necessarily work with them because it's half the size of a standard unit, so it needs a whole set of creative. Things like that, things like expectations to be paid as soon as the ads were served, when actually there might be a agency kind of contract which is 90 days. It might be how might the advertisers ask for it to be reported back. So the document provides things like guide to metrics. It just outlines what those standard formats are. It sticks in a load of acronyms and just clears everything up a little bit to help. So to your question around how it can help Black talent, short term, to Reg's point, especially, where you talk about, and what Dan was talking about, where people are leaving the industry, and if they're entrepreneurial and if they're moving into their own space, for those that maybe set up their own content hubs and want funding from advertising to sort of support that content, then naturally this is a really quick guide for them to be able to use to get up to speed and be able to figure that out. And long term, if these sites that had been struggling become more effective and efficient at sort of serving ads, more advertisers will want to work with them and use their inventory. They'll be able to produce more content, get more ads on them, and they'll thrive. So it's sort of like a win-win for the future. I mean, it's worth saying this guide is not specific to Black-owned media sites or those that serve that audience, but it is absolutely useful for sort of all diversity and inclusion, but it certainly can help in that space.
Just unmuting myself. Thanks so much, Sophia. That's really helpful. Another great sort of idea about something else that other people can do, particularly trade bodies, for their members and non-members, as you're saying, sort of highlighting it is for non-members too. We have got a question. I've got a few questions to ask the group, but I just from Stephen, an interesting one for Toby. So there's some really impressive changes that you've put into your external and internal comms and guideline. Is it too early to say what the impact this is having on your business, especially with all the disruptions with travel at the moment?
I think the answer is probably yes, as pertains to the specific D&I elements. I mean, what we do know is that we've done pre-testing around our advertising in Belgium and Netherlands, and it was actually some of the most positive pre-testing results I've ever seen in my life, given how often pre-testing can be a little bit, seemingly a little bit random. So in this instance, it was really good. And then we also, I think many of you probably know System One, the research company. They put the advertising through their methodology, which is much more sort of right brain, instinctive, emotional. And again, it came out really, really strongly. So clearly tying that specifically to the D&I aspects of what we've done, I can't technically do that, but it clearly doesn't show that there's been any negative impact. So I think it's the early signs are really positive, and just even from purely from sort of YouGov, we track things like YouGov consideration, and that's been positive since we went live. So I think it is a little bit early to pull out specifics, but the early signals are quite good. Obviously, trying to pull that apart from all the other noise going around COVID at the moment is quite tricky. But we're really pleased with where we've got to and where we're going. Yeah.
Maybe just to add to that, what about internally? Things like those guidelines. Yeah. I know many years ago, having worked on TUI, and the huge amount of your own content that you create around the holidays and so on. So yeah, I mean, how's that gone down?
Yeah, it's gone down really, really well. I think a lot of people are really pleased that we're being much more conscious about this now, and really trying to explicitly make attempts to make be clear about the D&I that's demonstrated in our advertising. So I think it seems to have gone down really well, and we've got a big retail network that seems to have gone down well there. And I think in some ways it feels like we're just sort of catching up with where we really should be, which is not doesn't reflect well on us. But I think at least now we're making conscious strides to get to a good place. So but yeah, there's been absolutely zero negative impact internally and all positive. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. In fact, that nicely segues to the first question I wanted to ask the wider group. So maybe you've answered that, Toby, in terms of if there are any struggles internally with signing this off, or even just barriers to using the framework at all. It'd be great to hear, maybe Reg, from you about when you kicked off this. I know it was sort of just before BRiM was launched, but did you have any internal struggles or challenges?
In terms of the framework, I think we were, if you like, emotionally on board. It was just having to unpick it and see or understand how, what areas related to us, what we could contribute to. And so I think that was a challenge there. And I think some work's been done to kind of simplify it, and that made it easier. So now we know that, okay, what we're doing around sponsorship fits within team composition. I think initially, if you give people a lot of information, and especially like their main focus is a day job, it's harder for them to kind of unpick it. So if you kind of, once it's boiled down to, like 4 key pillars or something, then I think it's easier for people to digest and then work with that. And sometimes it may be that they're not in the position to do all 4 pillars. It may be that they're focusing on one area, and as long as they know that that's okay, they can make progress and then move on to another pillar. So, like for instance, I've mentioned we're working on team composition, and then that may then lead us, if we out of that we look at entrepreneurship, that could we can then start developing on the other area around sort of pipelines.
Brilliant, thank you. Because as Bina said earlier, this is something that everybody can take part in, isn't it? As an individual working in an organisation, you don't have to be a decision maker. There is something for everybody in the framework. I think it's really important to sort of just keep hammering that home, that everybody can take something out of it and do something within the place that they work. How about you, Sophia? I mean, I guess from a membership organisation point of view, is it something that you're finding you're able to sort of share with the companies across your membership? You've got a really diverse membership.
Absolutely. So I run a D&I group across our membership, and we've got 50 odd companies engaged from our membership and growing every week. I'm adding 3-4 companies. Met with them yesterday, and they're really open. They're really grateful for all sorts of resources, and I think that's what's great about BRiM. It's so sort of broad. I suppose the question around tackling hurdles internally and how to get through that, I think the thing that I always come back to, or seems to always be prevalent, is, and it feels really staid, but education, well, language, vocabulary and confidence in talking about these topics, often that seems to be a barrier. So if people don't feel like they know how to say, what to say, the expressions to use, the words to use around any form of diversity or inclusion, they'll naturally sort of bury their head in the sand because they're worried to get it wrong, to put their foot in it. And I think that, if they can't have those difficult conversations or learn to improve their ways or realize what they're doing wrong unless they sort of talk and they're open. So I think often the first way in is giving people, and maybe that segues with what Red was saying, just sort of a really simple sort of background, whether it's one article that they can read or one case study that's really basic, but gives them those right terms, words, angles, perspectives, so that people can enter the conversation feeling a bit braver, to be honest. It's sort of basic, but I think it does stop things happening.
Thank you. Conscious of time, we're just at the last moment, and there's a really good question about our All-in Champion status, which I'll just quickly recap on. So yes, we announced very recently, a couple of weeks ago, that we're going to be introducing next June All-in Champion status. That means it's any business that can evidence that they've adopted the action plan to date, and they've put the actions that we've launched so far into action, essentially. So that will be all 3 that we've currently got. We're launching another 3, announcing another 3 in January at our Renew Summit. So by the time we come to June, there'll be 6, possibly even 9 actions that we want all businesses to have adopted, be making some progress on. And as you've seen from the 3 so far, I mean, in terms of downloading the framework and just actioning things within it, it's not too onerous a task at this stage. We're not asking for sort of changing employment policy. It's really pointing people in the right direction of frameworks and tools that can help them on this journey. And as Reg has pointed out really well, there's many businesses doing fantastic things already across all of these actions, and it's about sort of retrofitting what you're doing against the frameworks that we're sort of showing you. So there is something for everybody, no matter where you are in the journey. And it's really just, our hope is to collaborate the whole industry, and if we can all focus on these few things at a time, we will make significant progress. We'll obviously be measuring it, checking in. We're doing the census again in March 2023, so we can really track progress and hopefully change the dial on some of the the really shocking stats that Dan shared earlier about Black talent across all minority groups. So just very quickly to say, we've sort of run out of time in terms of other questions, and but this is very much one of the series of sessions. We'll be coming back in the new year, again on the BRiM topic and on this action, with some of the businesses that sit within the toolkit, so like Black and Brilliant, and other Black-owned businesses, just to get a sense of why this is so important and what they can offer the industry in terms of support and advancing talent. So thank you so much for your time again. It's great to see you. I was going to say every week, because it has been every week for the last few weeks. We'll have a break over Christmas now, but as I say, we'll evolve these sessions so that we'll just keep bringing the actions to life for you, making them as possible, easy as possible to adopt. And do get in touch with us at either Bina and I directly, or inclusion@adasop.org.uk. with any questions around the All-in Champion status, but hopefully that helps. We will be sharing a proper sort of document on what that means practically for all of you, probably in the first couple of weeks of January. But thanks, Catherine, for flagging that. Well, that's it. I'll give you 2 minutes over, but thanks so much everyone for joining us, and we'll see you very soon for the next Zoom sessions. But thanks again for your support on this work. Have a great day.